Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. So we're in chapter 51. This is 51F. We are in the series The Redemption, the Temple, and the New World. This one is called A River Flowed from Eden. Hallelu et Adonai kol goyim, shabechu kol ha'omim, ki gavar elenu chasdo ve'emet Adonai le'olam. Hallelujah. Rabbi Pinchas says, the waters of the well will ascend from under the threshold of the temple, and they will overflow and bubble over and issue forth and become 12 streams corresponding to the 12 tribes, as it is said in Ezekiel 47:1. Then he brought me back to the entrance of the house, and behold, there was water coming out from under the threshold of the house towards the east, for the house faced eastward, and the water was descending from below, from the right side of the house, from the south of the altar, because how the altar is placed. How many gates does the temple have? 13 gates, 12 for the tribes of Israel, and 1 for Jacob, Israel. This is just like how they were around his bed on his deathbed. You had the 13 meaning the 12 plus 1 over there. They gathered around him. So this is the lifeline of Israel and thereby the world and reality itself. You have the 13 principles of faith, the 13 principles of mercy. 13 is the numerical value of the word echad, one, singular, and 13 is also the numerical value of ahava, love. And what is this water that will burst forth from the ground? Our sages say that this is the wellspring of Miriam, by whose merit our forefathers were able to drink in the wilderness. But this water was not normal water. It gave all those who drank it binah and da'at, understanding and knowledge. The rock itself was it wasn't the depiction, what they're saying, that's standing over there right now in, in Saudi Arabia, although I am pretty much sure that is where Mount Sinai was, based on the fact that they sat in Midian, and that's exactly where Midian was, not in what is today the Sinai Desert. That's not where Midian is. Midian is on the other side of the Jordan. So, in any case, aside from that, it says the wellspring of Miriam was like a perfectly round ball, and that's where the water shot up from, and it would roll with them. So the rock itself, perfectly round, circular boulder that traveled with Israel throughout their 42 stops in the wilderness. It would reside always in the center of the camp, next to the tent of meeting, and it was said to have released so much water that you could sail a ship upon it. It would make like a massive pool over there in the middle of the camp. Remember, we're talking about 600,000 men just from the ages 20 and up. You're talking about anywhere between 2.5, being very conservative, 2.5 to 5 million people. It was space, massive space, okay? So the chieftains of each tribe would bring their respective staffs or scepters, what have you, and stick it in the water and drag it on the ground, making kind of like a canal. They pulled this water into the boundaries of their tribes until they reached the center, creating another small pool of water. From that point, every family's chieftain would do the same until you had small pools all around, and then they would bring it. Every Baal Bait, the father of every household, would take that water and drag it into his tent, thereby creating a personal mikveh inside your tent. So they would have all their personal mikvahs over there. They could have and again, it was constantly fresh, flowing water. It didn't have to be cleansed or anything like that. So you could go dunk in it, and you could also drink from it. Also, for modesty's sake, you don't want to go dunking, you have to do it completely naked in front of the eyes of everybody or anybody. As we do today, you have your personal mikvahs. Okay, 12 tribes, 12 streams of water. And even when Israel entered into the land of Israel, the well rolled in there with them, where it found its resting place temporarily in the Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret. Now, there have been many sages of the last 2,500 years who know the exact spot of where this well is located within the Kinneret. In other words, the Kinneret is a massive body of water. This wellspring is inside the Kinneret itself. And yet still water comes out from it. 1 second. All right. So how did they get to this? They would go on a boat and they would lower a bucket exactly into the right spot. And then they would pull it up and then they drink the water. So the last time I heard of this being done was with actually Rabbi Kaduri, who took a select few of his students to that exact spot. Go here, go left, go right, stop. Here we go. He lowered a bucket, he drew the water, and then he poured it all in cups and he gave them all to drink from it. Now, these waters are supposed to open your mind and consciousness to receiving almost the fullness of Torah, in the sense that you would not forget a single letter learned throughout your entire life and be able to connect everything. So it's not just enough to, let's say, if you have photographic memory and you remember every single piece of Torah that you read, your ability to connect it on all the levels, this is something you can actually, again, if I wouldn't even say AI, right? This is beyond this, but you can actually create a world, because what is reality? When we say God consciousness, people just throw out that term. All of reality is quite literally the consciousness, the thought, if you will, to simplify it, of the Creator. That's where we're at. You realize? Okay. All right. Just picture that for a second. You can't. All right. So anyway, like I said, we're not talking about photographic memory. You know, a lot of people can quote the Bible. Christians are great with quoting the Bible, but they understanding nothing. That's not what this is over here. I'm talking about supernal understanding, as the generation of the wilderness had possessed. Understanding is only given from God. The caveat is that the water goes where the water chooses to go. So the well is immersed within the water because only those who are worthy get to drink from the well of Miriam. So you could lower the bucket even in the right place, but how would you know that you're actually drinking water from Miriam's well or water from the Kinneret, which I would not recommend drinking today anyway. Rav Kaduri was one of those fortunate individuals, as he lived to the age of 107 years, sharp as a tack and a master of Torah. Drinking this water on its own will do nothing for you, okay? It's not that it's going to make you a genius, as you have to already be extremely knowledgeable in Torah. This only assists you, okay? Lehavdil. I'm really going to stretch here. There's something else. Let's say, okay, steroids, right? You see these crazy monsters that just shouldn't exist. It's not right. But again, just understand what I'm trying to say. If you just took steroids but did not work out, that's what that is, okay? Meaning you have to constantly be working on everything. That just assists you to look like a monster. Don't do steroids, please. Okay, you get the idea. Fine, let's move on. So water, as we know, is alluding to Torah, and we already read this in Jeremiah 17:13. The Lord, who is the source of the hopes of Israel, all that forsake you shall be shamed, and they who turn away from me shall be marked out on the earth, that they have forsaken the source of living waters, the Lord, et Adonai. Okay, so God is the source of these living waters. This well, living waters, and we will see this, what's coming out from under the temple. Zechariah 13:8-9. And it shall come to pass on that day that spring water shall come forth from Jerusalem, half of it to the eastern sea, which is what we're reading right now, and the other half to the western sea, which is the Mediterranean Sea, Hayam Hagadol, also known as. In summer and in winter it shall be, and the Lord shall be king of all over all the earth. On that day shall the Lord be one, and his name one. This, by the way, this verse is how we conclude all our prayers. It is the last verse said in Aleinu L'Shabeach. After the prayers, this is what we say at the very end, and this is how we conclude with the prayers with. So, Echad, Hashem Echad Ushmo Echad. God is Echad and his name Echad. Echad 13, living waters, or waters that are associated with life, as we read in Song of Songs 4:15. A garden fountain, which garden? Of Eden, right? A garden fountain, a well of living waters and flowing streams from Lebanon. מעיין גנים באר מים חיים ונוזלים מן לבנון. What is Lebanon? As we have learned before, it is not referring to the region of Lebanon. Rather, it is the third temple, the building which Malbin makes white our sins from crimson red. The true White House, not the other one. That's just a little background for you regarding our opening verse. The waters of the well will ascend from under the threshold of the temple. Now, what well is this? This is the well of Miriam, and they will overflow and bubble over and issue forth and become 12 streams corresponding to the 12 tribes, as said in Ezekiel 47, 1 through 5. So we'll read these verses, then highlight some of the terms Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer brings forth, because he breaks them down, but it's kind of everything put together. So not to confuse you, let's first read the text, and then we'll explain. Then he brought me back to the entrance of the house, and behold, there was water coming from under the threshold of the house towards the east, for the house faced eastward, and the water was descending from below, from the right side of the house, from the south of the altar. And he took me out by the way of the northern gate, and led me around by the way of the outside of the water gate, the gate of water, the way that faces east, meaning where it's coming from the east, going down to, we're going to see where, that's Sha'ar HaMayim. Water was trickling from the right side. When the man went out eastward with a cord in his hand, he measured 1,000 cubits, and he led me through the water reaching the ankles. By the way, who is this man? There are several opinions. Some say it's Gabriel the angel. Some say it is actually Jacob our father, Jacob Israel. So again, when the man went out eastward with a cord in his hand and measured 1,000 cubits, and he led me through the water reaching the ankles. Now this is important. You're going to see different body parts over here. And he measured 1,000 and led me through the water reaching the knees. And he measured 1,000 and led me through water that reached the loins. And he measured 1,000 cubits, a stream that I could not cross, for the water was so high that it was water for swimming, a stream that could not be crossed. So here's a breakdown of the streams that we just read in these verses. 3 to the south to pass through until the thighs, 3 to the west to pass through until the knees, 3 to the north to pass through until the waist, 3 to the east to pass through until the neck. Now in verse 3, where the Hebrew says Vayavireni b'mayim me afasim, which is translated water as reaching the ankles, this is not necessarily a wrong translation, because it can be understood in two ways. Okay, first of all, the word afasim means neither neck nor ankles, but it comes from the word ephes, modern day zero, naught, nothing. Nothing is there, right? It's like all y'all will be afasim, zero, nothing compared to God. Biblically, like we said, it means not as in not a number, but a lack of anything else. So the general understanding of the pshat, of the simple text, is that the water is so low, almost ephes, almost nothing over there, that it barely reaches the ankles. However, we are not in the pshat we're not in the pshat in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, and so our sages say that this refers to the neck, meaning on the other side, right? Because the neck is ephes, very low to the body. Meaning you have the feet below the ankles, the neck, and then you have the head, okay? They're just flipping it over. In other words, the neck is the end of the body from the top, leaving the head. The ankles are the end of the body from the bottom, leaving the feet. So here, our sages are focusing on the neck. Ezekiel then says that the waters became so high past the neck, overflowing that no man could cross. As it says in verse 5, a stream that I could not cross, for the water was so high that it was water for swimming, a stream that could not be crossed. Now, what does Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer say? Now when these waters overflowed, they would go on and descend upon the plain, as said in verse 8. And he said to me, this water is going out to the eastern frontier, and will descend upon the plain, and come to the sea that is brought out, and the waters will be healed. Mamash, it says, Venirpu, actually it says, Nirpeu hamayim, the waters will literally be healed. The Radal says that the plains mentioned here are what? as you can imagine, these are the plains of Jericho. If you ever drove from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea, you have to descend, but you can see basically Jericho over there to the north of the Dead Sea. And then as you descend 400 meters below sea level, it's a very, very flat plain. And then right over there on your right, that's where the Dead Sea, and it just goes for many, many miles down south. Okay, so like we said, the body of water that is in the plains of Jericho, the waters that will be healed. Now we discussed that the saltiness of the sea. What did we discuss? The saltiness of the sea was a result of the tears of the waters separating the Creator, right? Meaning the original waters were all sweet, not bitter, not salty. He goes on to say, in every field, PDE, and every field and every vineyard that do not produce fruit, when they are watered with these waters, they then produce fruit, as said in verse 9, and every living creature that will swarm. V'haya kol nefesh chaya asher yisharetz el kol asher yavo sham lechalim yichyeh. Okay, you understood the Hebrew? Yichyeh will live. And the fish will be very abundant, for these waters have come there. And wherever the stream flows, they shall be healed and live. And the water shall enter into the sea of salt. That's the Dead Sea. It's called Yam HaMelach, the Sea of Salt. It's, the way we call it today is the Dead Sea because nothing can live there, but that's how it's called. And completely cover it, meaning completely cover the Dead Sea, as said in verse 8, eastern frontier. Now, if you've been to the Dead Sea, it's only called that in English because no fish can live in there due to the high concentration of salt. It's, like we said, geographically the lowest place on Earth, over 400 meters below sea level, and it's getting lower by the day. It's just disappearing. Now, because it's so low, it also has the highest concentrations of minerals, natural minerals on the planet. And that's where we get today the healing muds and the salts, that it's incredibly rejuvenating to the skin. Incredible health benefits. In fact, and this is a known fact, Mark Antony of Rome conquered that area for Cleopatra, gifting it to her as her own private spa. So I actually gave a Parsha teaching standing on this salt island at the Dead Sea. It was 2019. The teaching is called, it's from the Parsha teachings. It's Parshat Achrei Mot, after death, forgive us our trespasses. You can go check it out, if not for, nothing more than seeing the stunning views around me and seeing how much I've aged. Anyway, back to our verse. There are also two interpretations that looks towards El Hagalil HaKadmoni. Okay, what does this mean? The way is El Hagalila HaKadmona, to the Galilee, as in the Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret, so that's already to the north. And then to the Kadmoni, to the east. Kedem is to the east, the other sea, the Dead Sea. Now, the other way is that the plain or valley of the east, which is the area of Jericho, just north of the Dead Sea, as opposed to the plains of the north, which are around a mountain range and the Kinneret. So in other words, it's most likely speaking of the Dead Sea and not the Kinneret, based on the topographical description that they're giving. All kinds of fishes would link to the Great Sea, it says. That is the Mediterranean Sea to the west, as said in verse 10, and it will be a place beside which fishermen will stand. From Ein Gedi is actually by the Dead Sea, from Ein Gedi to Ein Eglim, a place for spreading nets they will be. Their fish will be of many kinds, like the fish of the Great Sea, very many, meaning like the Mediterranean. So like the fish of the Great Sea, because there will be fish of great stature over there. The waters will connect thereby, beginning to rectify the first machloket. What is machloket? Dispute or separation on the second day of creation. Remember, machloket comes from the word lechalek, to divide. And what was divided? I understand that it said that God separated light from darkness on day one. Very good, but that's not what we're talking about. That's not a machloket. These are two different elements with two different functions. But on the second day, what does it say? And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the water. There is a body of water. I'm going to separate the waters. Water here, water there. Maim Maim Shamaim. Shamaim is heavens, the sky. That's what I'm talking about. It's not light and dark opposites. We're talking about the same thing with the separation. There is a machloket, and also our sages say that hell, Gehenom, was created on the second day because of this machloket. It goes with that. Let there be an expanse in the midst of the water, and let there be a separation between water and water. Mavdil, havdalah, separation. And God made the expanse and separated between the water that was below the expanse and the water that was above the expanse, and it was so. Now, the waters, the same element, are going to be joined together down here. No more separation. And as we have learned, what happens down here in this world is what affects the world above. And what will happen to these waters of the Great Sea and the Sea of Salt? As Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer says, they become sweet and they ascend the river. Yes, ascend the river all the way to Jerusalem, where they will be caught in its nets. Now, we're already witnessing supernatural occurrences over here as the salt water will become sweet and then it will ascend. The properties of water are always to go and find the lowest place. Water pours, fire rises. Those are the properties, right? That's why water is chesed, because it is bestowed. Whereas fire, we need the fire on the altar to rise up. You have the 42-letter name of God in the Ana Bekoach that the priests used to say upon the altar, and that would raise the korbanot up with the properties of fire. While the Yud Ke Vav Ke, also in 72, the 72-letter name of God, would bring down the blessings, water and fire. You see? So these are just some of the miracles that our forefathers witnessed at the crossing of Yam Suf. As we discussed earlier in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer teachings, the water was pouring upwards, and then it also turned sweet like honey, so they could pass by and they could just stick their heads in there and they could drink. So salty seawater, not only was it not dropping, but it was rising and it became sweet like honey. But our sages were not only referring to the water becoming sweet, not like honey, but you know what I mean. The fish themselves will become sweet, meaning their makeup will evolve to that of sweetwater fish. Everything gets renewed over here. And this isn't mentioned, but I can't help but notice that once upon a time, the Dead Sea area used to be the lowest spiritual place in the world. Sodom and Gomorrah, right? The lowest spiritual place in the world, Sodom and Gomorrah. They are the reincarnation of the Tower of Dispersion, the Tower of Babel, who were the reincarnation of the generation before the flood. Okay? Because of this, God literally flipped it upside down, as it said in the simple text in Genesis 19. And the Lord caused to rain down upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord from heaven, and he turned over, vayahafoch, to turn over, literally, these cities and the entire plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities and the vegetation of the ground. Now, what does this area look like now? I mean, it's gorgeous, but it looks like a wasteland, and you can still smell the sulfur over there. Today, as we said, it is the lowest geographical place on earth. It used to be the lowest spiritually. Now it's the lowest geographical place on earth. And those waters from there are going to ascend to the highest geographical, well, soon, a place on earth, but to the spiritually highest place on earth. And that means something. You get it? Going to Jerusalem. And I said, because we see this in our writings, Jerusalem actually will be geographically the highest place on earth. As Mount Carmel, Mount Moriah, and Mount Sinai, they're all going to join together and they're going to become one mountain. And the elevation will be 12 kilometers high, as it is surrounded by Jerusalem and then the rest of Israel. Just think of like a massive, massive pyramid in a sense. For reference, Mount Everest, the highest peak, is 8.8 kilometers high. So this is Jerusalem, the tip where the temple is going to be. That's going to be 12 kilometers, the highest place on earth. Spiritually, physically, you name it. So again, and it will be a place beside which fishermen will stand from Ein Gedi to Ein Eglaim, a place for spreading nets. Their fish will be of many kinds, like the fish of the great sea, very many. So this verse is interesting because why does it bring up these two places? Ein Gedi, we know where that is, okay? It's towards the southwestern side of the Dead Sea. It's like a small freshwater trail. It's beautiful. It's not so big, but it's, David was hiding in that area, as it says. But it's not really a fishing spot because it's isolated. And Ein Eglaim, we don't know where it is, but it used to be a watering hole. And both these places, at one point, were places of idol worship. Those who worshipped the lamb, as many still do today, the lamb god, and those who worship the ox, which is the same root of those who worship the lamb, mind you, they just don't know it. But these places will be cleansed of idolatry through living waters, coming out of the well of Miriam from beneath the temple in Jerusalem. A big fish will be there in sweet water, the size of the fish from the great sea. Now, what is the spiritual significance of fish? Why do we see fish? What was Jacob's blessing, specifically to the descendants, to the sons of Joseph, the tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim? From Genesis 48:16, it says, "May the angel who redeemed me from all harm bless the youths, and may they be called by my name," Israel, right? "And by the name of my fathers, Avraham and Yitzchak, and may they multiply abundantly like fish in the midst of the land." Could have said rabbits or whatever. I don't know. Fish, but in the land? What is the significance of fish? They can see you, but you cannot see them as they swim beneath the surface. And why did Jacob bless Joseph's descendants with this specific blessing? Because the evil eye, by the way, Joseph was also born in his mazal, his zodiac is that of fish, as is Moses. So specifically Joseph, the evil eye had no hold over Joseph, and Joseph is the adversary to the adversary. When Esav, Edom Christianity, their guardian angel is Satan himself, the adversary. When Esav, who is Edom, who is Rome, and everything to come out of there, including but not limited to the religion of the Lamb God, when he stepped up to Rachel, it was Joseph who then came around and shielded his mother from the evil eye of Esav, growing 6 cubits in each direction. 6, 6, 6, the mark of the Jew, which is, by the way, 6 and 6 and 6. That's 18, which is chai, life. The irony, I know. And so when the kingdom split, you had, meaning the ancient kingdom, you had Judah and then you had Israel. So Judah from the line of David and Israel from the line of Ephraim. Like Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef from the tribe of Ephraim, also known as Mashiach ben Ephraim. The 10 tribes represented by Ephraim were kidnapped and dispersed among the nations by the Assyrians. Until this day, we don't know where they are. But most likely, they were all mixed up in whatever's left today, right? From the major religions, they're most likely within Christianity and Islam. Islam is closer to Judaism on the basis where we just believe in one God. Nevertheless, right? But since Christianity comes from the very root of Esav, blood obsessed, they would need to be invisible to Satan, who governs over them, who is the ministering angel of Esav, of Edom, of Rome, of the Christian religion, and the Western world. This is textbook. These are all holy sparks that need to come out of there. We still got 10 tribes. Israel cannot be complete without all the 12. Some may not know who they are, but those who do, or at least when they wake up, realizing that they are actually worshiping Satan himself via the other guy, like, no, I'm praying to God, but through him. Whoa, we gave classes on this, didn't we? They will be protected because of the blessing of Jacob and the bloodline of Joseph. That's why this blessing was given to them. So going back to the fish and the bull and the ox, right? The ox also represents Joseph from the side of the left, right? The side of judgment. On the right is Judah, on the left is Joseph, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben Yosef. And furthermore, and we also learned this here, Edom is likened to a bull or a cow. As when they graze, they trample the earth and they eat everything living down until the root, only leaving destruction and emptiness behind. That's what Edom does. Wherever they go, from the root, they destroy the land. So when the living waters will wash over these places, they will purify the way for the lost tribes to return. We continue. And there, along the riverbanks, will grow every tree bearing fruit of its own kind. Nothing mixed, everything after its own kind, as said in verse 12. But by the stream, on its bank, from either side will grow every tree for food. Its leaf will not wither, neither will its fruit end. Month after month, its fruit will ripen, for its waters will emanate from the sanctuary, and its fruit shall be for good, and its leaves for a cure, litrufa, medicine. So, PD says, and every month they will bless their fruits, as said in the verse, they will ripen. Some of them will grow, and some will be eaten, meaning there will never be a shortage. Never. If you pick everything at once, they just keep popping up. And even the leaves themselves will be used. As said, and its fruit shall be for food, and its leaves for a cure. And every man who is ill washes in those waters and is healed. As said in verse 9, Kol asher yavo sham nachalim yichyeh, chaim, life. Chai, 18, 666. Anyone who comes to these streams will live. Why does our text specify healing when the verse states life? Because the healing is from the sickness of death. Exactly. This, of course, refers to both the physical body and all its ailments, as well as cleansing the spiritual nephesh. And anyone who has a bruise, remember, physical or spiritual, will take one of these leaves and place it upon the blemish, and he will be healed physically and spiritually. So again, the water, it's not just water for drinking, it's Torah itself. It is coming from the sanctuary. You understand this? Okay. The fruit for food and the leaves for healing, meaning no part is wasted. And Rabbi Yochanan says, for healing, one takes the leaf and sucks it, and it helps with the digestion. In other words, we're talking about inside as well. And let me tell you something. This prophecy was not relevant up until 30 or 40 years ago. Why? Microplastics. Oh yeah, you don't even know. Since they are poisoning our food, our water, and our air, your average person, no joke, Google this please, find this out, and feel free to freak out, okay? Your average person consumes 5 grams of plastic each week. This does not leave your body, people. It does not. That is the equivalent of a credit card. Eat a credit card every week for the rest of your life. That's what's happening. It's accelerating. Are you not sleeping well? Do you have headaches, digestive issues, cognitive decline, chronic pain, fatigue, depression, memory loss? Do you still believe in the system and that your government has your best interests at heart? Sorry, I already said cognitive decline. And so many other things. Well, do we have the solution for you? It's called Pray for the Redemption and the Peace of Israel. And the best part is, it's totally free. What's the catch? There's no catch. It's totally free. Now, how did our sages know over 2,000 years ago that we would need this solution to cleanse our digestive system? How? This is written in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. What is going on here? Plastics only became mainstream, started mass production only in 1907. And that's one element in the plethora of ways that we are being poisoned. But I digress. We have the 4 directions of the streams that are sprouting from beneath the house of God. And just again, before we go back, Even our body needs to be redeemed. Our body needs to be cleansed. That is why we are buried in the earth. Ma'afal bato ma'afal tashuv, like we learned in the earlier teachings of Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, when God said to the serpent that, oh, okay, I'm also going to curse Adam. Serpent's like, right on. But you're going back into the earth, right on. But that is how you are healed. That is how you are cleansed. That's why we are buried. Because even your body sins, so your body has to be redeemed. Okay? So everything is going to be redeemed. Inside, outside, spiritually, everything. Okay? 4 directions of the streams pouring from beneath the house of God, which, as we've learned, is directly beneath the heavenly throne of God. That is like the physical mirror image of God's heavenly throne. God's heavenly throne. Yes, God is everywhere, but for our simple understanding, hence the gates of heaven, as Jacob said in Genesis 28:17. And he was frightened and he said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven, meaning there is one gate. Now, I've actually learned in some of the deeper books, it says exactly how it is. It gives you the measurements of the opening on top. It is a perfect square, and it goes down like a 4-sided massive pyramid. Halfway through, from the gates of heaven, from the gate of heaven to the earth, halfway through is that square in the middle. That is going to be Jerusalem, the New Jerusalem. And the rest of it is going to be the rest of Israel. Okay? He was frightened. He said, how awesome is this place? None other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Now, what is this reminiscent to, everything that we are reading over here? Gave it away in the title verse. In the title, Genesis 2, and the Lord God planted a garden in Eden from the east, and he placed there Adam, whom he had formed. And the Lord God caused to sprout from the ground every pleasant tree to see and good to eat, and the tree of life in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And a river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it separated and became 4 heads in each direction. So we have taught here many times that there is a supernal Garden of Eden and a terrestrial Garden of Eden. We have Gan Eden right here. When Adam and Eve were created, and they were placed in the spiritual Garden of Eden, and when they sinned, they were demoted, if you will, and they were lowered to the terrestrial Garden of Eden. When they were expelled, where did Adam find himself? On Mount Moriah. That's the exit, on Temple Mount, right over there, to the east of the mountain, it says. And as we know that the entrance to the Garden of Eden, the entrance to this realm is where? It is in Hebron, specifically the cave of Machpelah, where Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah currently are taking a nap. What we are seeing here is that after the world is corrected, after it is purified and rectified, when those who cling to their idols and their false beliefs will be no more, then the rivers will flow, and the trees will blossom and bloom, and the waters and fruits will heal and strengthen those who remain. Then this world will become the Garden of Eden. We will be able to see it, and at its center, the tree of life. That is the house of God. This is all locked away for now. But of this time, King Solomon gave us great insight in Song of Songs chapter 4, saying, a locked up garden is my sister, my bride. A locked up spring, a sealed fountain. It's all there waiting for us. Your arid fields are as pomegranate orchards with sweet fruit, henna and spikenard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, Moria, with all frankincense trees, myrrh and aloes, with all the chief spices. A garden fountain, a well of living waters. It's all there, just describing what's going to happen. And flowing streams from Lebanon, the temple. Awake, O north, and come, O south wind. Blow up my garden, that the spices thereof may flow out. Let my beloved come to his garden and eat his sweet fruit. And of this time it is said in Zechariah 14:8 and 9, and it shall come to pass on that day that the living waters shall come forth from Jerusalem, half to the eastern sea and half to the western sea. In summer and in winter it shall be. And the Lord shall become king over all of the earth. On that day shall the Lord be one, and his name one. והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. And thus concludes our chapter and the mini-series of the redemption, the temple, and the new world. As always, thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and Shabbat Shalom. Bye.